As promised, we bring in Russ Lande now, former NFL scout and our NFL draft expert here at BTN, to look ahead at some of the players who need to have big games this bowl season. But let's take a step back first. We're going to look at some players who are not yet seniors and aren't 100% sure if they should go to the NFL, if they should not. How does that process work? If you're an underclassman, who do you talk to and what kind of info do you get?
Well, firstly, you have to be cautious because the reality is this is a career and monetary decision that will affect you forever. But what you do is you submit your name and your paperwork to the NFL committee. What the committee does is it asks NFL scouts, combine scouts that work for their national or blessed, so they will evaluate the players, submit their grade back to the committee, and the committee then sends that on to the player. When I did it for Robert Gallery and actually gave him a 5th-round grade as a junior, and hopefully that convinced him to stay in another year, which helped his draft stock a lot.
Yeah, I think it did help.
Yeah, a little bit.
His draft stock just a bit. Well, let's take a look now at the top 10 that you have, our ArcelorMittal countdown of the power rankings, if you will. This is who you see from the Big Ten going highest in the draft. Taylor Lewan up there at number 1 still, which might be a surprise to some people as he didn't have quite the amazing season as he has in the past. Allen Robinson from Penn State, Denard, Shazier, some defensive players there. All of these are pretty big names that Big Ten fans would know. But let me start off with those two at the top. Why are Lewan and Robinson 1 and 2?
Well, I think with Lewan, the primary reason is it's hard to find offensive tackles in this day and age, and he's a tall kid with great feet. He's improved drastically as a run blocker. So I think all of those things help him stay atop. In terms of Allen Robinson, you're talking about a big receiver who can change games when he has the ball in his hands. And in today's NFL, when you look at guys like Calvin Johnson and other big receivers like Larry Fitzgerald, big receivers are sort of the name of the game. That's what he brings to the table. He's a guy who can change games. He's got great catching radius. He's got better speed than you expect for a big guy, runs through contact. I think he's going to be a surprise guy if he does come out to go very high in the draft, potentially top 15.
In the first round?
In the first round, yep.
We saw a video at the beginning there of Taylor Lewan. A lot of people who watched him this year said this is hurting his draft stock. It seems like you're saying, no, that's not true.
Not really. I mean, the reality is it a great year? Has he improved drastically since last year? No. He's done a good job of improving as a run blocker. His pass blocking is still not great because he doesn't use his hands aggressively, but he's still one of the best offensive linemen in the country. He's a tall kid, good feet. He can change directions easily to adjust to great pass rushers. So even though it wasn't a spectacular year for him, guys like him are hard to find, and that's why he's still going to be a high draft pick.
Let's look at some of the names that you had on that list that have improved their stock and tell us specifically why those guys stick out to you.
Well, I think you started at Michigan State, Darquez Denard, tremendous cornerback, very physical football player. I think coming into the year, NFL team said, does this kid have the quickness and speed to really stay with the top-flight NFL receivers? He has shown throughout the season that not only can he get his hands on a guy and out-physical them, but he can change directions, he can close on the ball explosively, and he can stay with guys deep down the field. Don't be shocked if this guy ends up being one of the first corners taken and a top 20 pick in the first round. Teams love his ball skills. They love his willingness to play physical because it combines with a guy who's a very good athlete. Then when you look at Ryan Shazier, a year ago, NFL scouts had big concerns about his instincts. He often took false steps at the beginning of the play. This year, you can tell he put in the time off the field, watching film, doing those things to become a better player. He's much more quicker to diagnose, and he has rare athletic ability. His first step getting started to the ball and his explosive closing ability make him a game-changing player. And then when you look at Rashid Hegman out of Minnesota, a long-armed interior defensive lineman, he's done a much better job this season of playing with leverage and using those long arms to his advantage. Prior to this year, he was a guy that would get tied up, didn't know how to extend and defeat blocks. This year, he's shown he can do that. What's impressive about him is NFL teams that play 4-3 defenses like him as a tackle, and teams that play 3-4 defenses love him as a defensive end. So he's really helped his draft stock immeasurably with his play this year.
A lot of these guys that you highlighted have bodies that you just look at and go, got it,
yep,
NFL talent.
Yes.
Right, no-brainer. Or they have track records that go back to 4- and 5-star prospects coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Jared Abbrederis is not one of those guys,
not at all.
But you do have him in your top 10 list. How come?
Well, I think when you watch him on film, I mean, he jumps out as he's a football player. What he does is he runs great routes. He gets his head and his hand around quickly when he comes out of his breaks, catches the ball very naturally. Then you add in his return ability, which is an instant way to get on the field as a rookie. I think this is a guy, and a lot of NFL scouts have told me they really like him, is that he's going to be a starting slot receiver early in his career. Now, obviously, he's a slight-framed guy, and that's a concern, and that's why he's not going to be a guy that goes in the first round. But I think in that third to fourth round, some team's going to take a shot on him.
How about that? As high as third or fourth round.
It's pretty amazing for a guy that looks more like someone who's going to be delivering your mail or something than he does an NFL player.
Let's go a little bit deeper than the top 10. A few more names that people will likely hear drafted. This is 11 through 17. C.J. Fedorowicz, Jeremy Gallon's had a great year for Michigan. Max Bulla, Devin Gardner, John Urschel from Penn State, who recently won yet another award. At 13, you have Jack Mewhort. How come?
You know, I think he's an underrated football player. When you watch him on film, you see a guy who's solidly built, better feet than you expect, and really does a great job of blocking with base and leverage, uses his hands very quickly and aggressively to get hold of his man. I think he's a guy that is not going to be talked about much right now, but come draft day, he'll be a third or a fourth round pick. And I think a guy that challenges to start as a rookie because he's so technically sound, so competitive. He's one of those guys who will do whatever it takes to keep his man from making the play, which is a hard trait to find in an offensive lineman.
Great insight, Russ Lande. Thanks as always.
Of course.